In 1955, 23 coal miners descended into the Blackwood mine outside Beckley, West Virginia, for a Thursday shift that should have been routine. None came back. Blackwood Mining blamed a catastrophic cave-in, paid out modest settlements, sealed the shaft, and the town swallowed grief that hardened into history. For half a century, the official story held, until 3 local men pried their way through a cracked seal and found a door that should not exist. Tyler Brennan's hands were trembling when he set the silver power shot on Deputy Roy Hensley's desk. Steve Hoffman sat with his head between his knees, dry heaving into a wastebasket. Matt Kelly stood at the window, boots dusted in gray that had been sleeping 50 years. "You boys been drinking?" Hensley asked, though he already knew better. 23 years on the force had taught him how trauma looked. "We found something," Tyler said, pushing the camera toward him. The early photos were familiar. Abandoned equipment, the elevator cage fossilized mid-descent, a calendar forever stopped in November 1955. Then concrete replaced rock, and a steel door appeared in the beam of a flashlight. Multiple deadbolts, all locked from the outside. Behind it, the flash revealed a concrete chamber with 23 iron beds bolted to the floor, buckets in corners, a water spigot on a wall, and everywhere, scratches. Tally marks layered until counting felt obscene. 147, Tyler whispered. 5 months. Hensley scrolled, opened government surplus crates. Cans dated December 55, January, February, March, April. Messages carved deep enough to outlast flesh. Walter Morrison, tell my wife, they knew. Carl Briggs, murdered, not accident. Eddie Tanner, sick since January, they won't let us out. On the ceiling, Blackwood Mining knows. The doctor knows. Radiation in Tunnel 9. We are evidence they want buried. What the hell were they digging? Hensley muttered. They had one name already, Walter Morrison. His grandson, Jake, lived in town. Hensley called him and the state police, and when Jake walked into the office, 6'2" and steady as poured concrete, he took the camera like a reliquary. He studied the scratches, the dates on the cans, the ceiling accusation, and something inside him unclenched into rage. "My grandfather didn't die in a cave-in," he said evenly. "He was locked in a box." There was one more name to say out loud. Only one miner assigned to Section 9 had missed that shift, Earl Watson. He'd called in sick November 3, 1955, and lived since like a ghost who hadn't earned it. They drove to his yellow ranch, where the paint peeled and the lawn was cut with mathematical precision. Earl sat on the porch waiting, 87, thin as paper, hands shaking more than age. "Knew you'd come," he said. "Been waiting 50 years." Inside, guilt had wallpapered the house in faces. 23 young men grinning in work clothes, wives and babies tucked into frames around them. A back room held boxes stacked to the ceiling, pay stubs, medical records, a mine map inked in red, a timeline running from November 55 to April 56. Earl spread out pay slips dated months after the supposed accident. "Main entrance was sealed," he said. "Service tunnel from the old Blackwood property wasn't. That's how they brought food. That's how I went down." He told it with the flat cadence of a confession practiced in the dark. Late October 1955, they hid ore in Section 9 that wasn't coal. "Yellowcake," he said, "uranium. Your grandfather wanted to report it. Follow safety. Blackwood was there within an hour, like he'd been waiting. A private 1953 survey, never shared with regulators, had predicted the vein. Coal was cover. Then the math no one wanted. 2 weeks of unprotected exposure. A company doctor, Vernon Mills, who said the mine would be shut. Federal investigators called, fortunes lost. A different solution was chosen. The cave-in was staged, dynamite in an empty section, enough debris to make recovery impossible. Families got funerals for empty coffins and insurance checks. We moved the men into that chamber. Blackwood told them it was temporary, quarantine. Said they were contaminated, dangerous. Said Mills was working on treatment. Mills filed a report naming radiation levels beyond salvage. 3 days later, he died in a car accident on a clear road with no skid marks. Blackwood gave the eulogy. Then he kept feeding the men until April 18th and stopped.
"Thomas?" Jake asked, meaning Richard Blackwood's son. 25, Earl said, eager to impress. He's the one who called starving them merciful. Earl had a briefcase. Inside lay contracts for off-book uranium sales, medical files showing radiation exposure for each trapped miner, ledgers with payments to keep quiet, and a cassette labeled R. Blackwood and T. Blackwood, April 17, 1956. "You'll need more than my word," Earl said. "I recorded what I could. I didn't have courage then. Have it now." Jake didn't wait for warrants. He drove to the mansion on Ridgeway Drive, walked into the garage where Thomas was polishing a Mustang he never drove, and showed him a photo of his grandfather's message. He named Earl. He named the ledger. Then Thomas opened a safe and handed over a leather journal, his father's entries in neat surgical script. November 1. Mills confirms radiation exposure. Solution required. November 3. Containment protocol initiated. 23 subjects relocated. Families notified of tragic accident. December 12. Mills becoming problematic. Arrangements made for permanent silence. February 8th. Morrison organizing resistance. Remarkable leadership. April 17th. Thomas suggests cessation of resources. Merciful. April 18th. Final delivery completed. Nature will handle disposal. He handed Jake a small box. "Personal effects we kept as leverage," he said. Inside lay a wedding ring engraved W&E Morrison, June 1937, and a watch stopped at 21:17. "When we resealed the chamber," Thomas said, "the last sound was that watch ticking in the dark." Hensley's unit took Thomas without a struggle. Hazmat teams went into Section 9 in white suits, helmet cams sending back imagery that hurt to watch, the clawed steel of the door's interior, tally marks seared on concrete, birthdays and children's names scratched in hands that knew they would be forgotten. In a cavity behind the water pipe, they found a bundle wrapped in stained cloth, 23 tokens, rings, watches, photos, and a sheet of paper signed by 23 men. "We were exposed to radiation in Tunnel 9. Instead of treatment, we were imprisoned. This is our testimony. Tell our families we fought. Tell them we died as men." Only one body remained in the chamber, curled near the start of a scraped-out exit. The others had been moved. Ground-penetrating radar at the Blackwood estate told them where, a mass beneath a poolhouse foundation that Jake himself had poured 2 years earlier. Under floodlights, he ran the excavator slow and surgical, stopping when the first skull surfaced. 22 sets of remains lay beneath, still in work clothes, identification tags surviving where flesh had not. Jake knew his grandfather by the belt buckle engraved WM 1938. He didn't know how to stand upright while looking at it. Dr. Sarah Chen at the State Medical Examiner's Lab identified 19 by morning, the rest by week's end. The bones held radiation signature, like frost scars in wood. Some fingers showed human bite marks. They chewed their own hands at the end, Dr. Chen said quietly. Among Walter's remains, they found a metal cylinder in his throat. He had swallowed it to hide it from the fire. Inside lay a thin scroll, Day 141, a last testimony naming names and acts, and ending with, "Please tell my boy I thought of him every day." The story went national. Phones lit up with other families, other accidents at Blackwood through the 1940s and early 1950s where bodies were never recovered. In Blackwood's archives, the team found earlier ledgers, 1943, Section 4, containment complete, 12 subjects. 1947, Section 6, protocol initiated, 8 subjects. 1951, 5 more. 3 more mass graves surfaced on the estate, 12, 8, and 5. 71 murdered across 16 years. Jake's father, James, called from the interstate. "I remember standing at the fence. They told me Papa was doing important work underground. I wrote him a letter. He never got it." Thomas's own journal added a jagged mercy. May 2, 1956, 3 a.m. Returned to chamber alone. Morrison still alive. Gave water. He died at 4:17. Stayed with him. Father can never know. It didn't absolve him. It mattered anyway. The community center became a morgue and a chapel. Children of the dead, now in their 60s and 70s, stood beside tables draped in white. "My mom remarried a man who hit me," said Paul Briggs. "My real dad was starving in the dark." "Mine wore black until 82, said Eddie Tanner, Jr. Dr. Chen brought forward evidence that felt like being stabbed with ice. Finger bones bearing teeth marks. The tin soldier a 10-year-old had given his father before the shift, found clutched in Walter's left hand. Civil suits formed. A federal task force began to pull threads that led beyond Beckley. In a basement vault, behind a false wall, the FBI found Thomas's insurance, files dating to 1943, photographs, and 32 hours of tapes his father had made with officials. On one, Richard spoke to a man identified only as Colonel. The Colonel knew exactly what problems in containment meant. "Eliminate them," he said. The colonel had retired as General Whitmore. His son, a sitting senator running for president, exited the race within a day of hearing his father's voice online. Then the bones told another secret. Tiny drill marks on the 6 newest victims. Dr. Chen's x-rays said medical sampling. Employment records named a doctor who replaced Mills in 1970 and stayed until 1988, Michael Brennan. Tyler's grandfather. The boy who had carried the camera lay the pages down with shaking hands. "He ran a free clinic after 88, Jake offered. Maybe guilt." In a second hidden cell in Section 2, they found Dr. Mills himself, suit intact, a bullet hole in the skull, his last words carved into concrete, "I tried to help. They made my conscience a crime." November 3, 2005 dawned gray, and 78 hearses rolled down Main Street, 23 from 55, 25 more from earlier accidents, 6 whistleblowers from the 70s and 80s dissolved in acid but traced by notes and Polaroids, and Dr. Mills. 3,000 people filled Reston Cemetery. The governor apologized. A senator said his father had been complicit. A 12-year-old girl read a letter to the great-grandfather she'd never met. When the coffins went down, Amazing Grace swelled without being asked. Then sirens cut the hymn. The van transporting Thomas to federal court had been rammed. Guards lay unconscious. Blackwood gone. Coleman, the lead investigator, barked orders, but Jake already knew. "He's going to the mine," he said. "He's not running. He's retrieving something." They found him in Section 9 where the beds had been, holding a gun and a metal box. "Put it down," Coleman said. He did. Inside was his own final insurance. Tapes from 1943 through 1987. Buyers, generals, judges, half the Senate Armed Services Committee, 2 presidents briefed and silent. "Why now?" Jake asked. "I'm dying. Cancer. Months. Prison or hospice, it's the same. Your grandfather asked me to tell the truth. I waited 50 years. Cowardice is the family curse. I can at least break it now." What followed felt like a dam breaking.
a national task force opened investigations into accidents at mines and plants across the country. Congress passed the Blackwood Victims Memorial Act, mandating century-long retention of workplace death records and federal review. The Blackwood estate, nearly $200 million in compounded blood money, was liquidated and divided among the families. Many donated to unions and safety funds. Judges and legislators in West Virginia resigned. Earl Watson pleaded guilty and died in custody 3 weeks later. Thomas died in his cell with one sentence in his final statement worth anything at all. "Every man who died in those chambers was worth more than everything we sold. I learned that too late."
The mine was sealed again, this time with a bronze plaque at the entrance bearing 78 names. At the bottom, they believed someone would find them. Tyler Brennan became an investigative photographer, pointing his lens at the places where industry met flesh and lied about it. Jake went back to building foundations and to the other work that had found him, standing up in rooms and saying a name that the state had tried to bury. He kept his grandfather's ring and the tin soldier in his pocket. On the first anniversary, the families came back to the gate. No speeches, no cameras, just silence you could drink. A child tugged her mother's sleeve and asked why the bad men had done it. "Because they thought money mattered more than lives," her mother said. "Because they thought truth could be buried forever." She knelt, touched the plaque. "It can't. Sometimes it takes 50 years and 3 boys with a camera, but truth always finds a way." Jake stood alone at the seal and listened to the wind lifting through the trees. Somewhere below, the rooms remained, empty now, but full of marks, names, calendars that had kept men tethered to a world that had pretended to bury them. Walter Morrison had swallowed a message so it would outlast fire. It had. He had believed someone would find them. Someone did. The dead could rest. The living would not forget.